Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Today we're looking at Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 17. You may recall from verse 15 onward, the Lord said that he is going to raise up a nation, we know it's the Babylonians, and bring them against his stubborn and disobedient people to chasten them, to discipline them. And in verse 17 today, he's going to bring that statement to somewhat of a conclusion. Let's go ahead and read this verse in Hebrew, long verse, as we get started. Ve'akal katzircha ve'lachmecha yoklu banecha uvnotecha yokal tzonecha uvkarecha yokal gafnecha utenatecha yeroshesh Are mitzarecha asher atar boteach b'chena b'haref. So we start with a vav consecutive on a perfect. So this is a perfect. It's a 3ms kal from our verb akal, which means usually to eat. Perfect consecutive, as I said. We're staying in the future tense here, what's going to happen. So this is usually translated to eat. You're going to see in this sense here, in this context, we're going to want to give it more the sense of devour. In other words, to totally consume. And he will consume and he will devour. He referring to the Babylonian soldier, perhaps the Babylonian army, perhaps a collective term for the Babylonians as a whole. He will consume, he will devour your harvest. So katsir is harvest with a suffix on it, a 2ms suffix referring back to God's people, the individual Israelite, but perhaps also in a collective sense. Hebrew moves very easily between the individual and the collective, back and forth sometimes in the same verse. You're going to see that. He will consume, he will devour your harvest and your lechem, literally your bread, as a more general term for food as well. And they will devour. Now, this time we've moved to an imperfect, but you're going to with the yod at the beginning and an u at the end. So this is an imperfect, but it's a 3mp. Again, a kal from the same verb, akal. So you can see we've moved from a singular over here to a plural over here. There's really no change in meaning, though. And you're going to see that most of our translations in English are going to keep a they, a 3mp meaning or translation all the way through just for consistency. Even though the Hebrew has a singular here, you're going to see a singular here, here, and down here as well. But here you have a plural. There's this shift back and forth between the singular and the plural. And they will devour your sons. So suffix again with the plural of bain. With the yod here, we know it's banim, your sons, and your daughters. This banot, that's the plural of bat, meaning daughter. And so we know this is your daughters. He will devour, once again back to the singular, your flock. Literally, it's your flock, meaning the small animals, but this is a collective term, again, for small animals as a whole, and your cattle. Again, a singular, but a collective term. And he will devour, oh my goodness, is there going to be anything left? Geffen. Geffen is the word for vine, so this might be your vineyards or your vines. Again, it's a singular. Your vine and your fig tree. Ta'ina is usually with a hey at the end here, but since you add a suffix, you change that to a tau, but this is a fig tree, again, in a collective sense. Now here's the one verb that is a little bit unusual, might give us a little bit of a problem. We yod at the beginning. We're going to have an imperfect, but and it's going to be a 3ms. But from the poel stem, P-O-E-L, which is one of the less frequent stems that we find, and this is because we have a geminate verb here. You have the verb rashash, which is quite rare. It's actually only used 2 times. It's used here in the poel, and then it's used in Malachi chapter 1, verse 4, I think, in a pual, very clearly a pual, so it's sort of the passive of the poel here. And this word means to smash or to shatter in the puel stem. So, and he will smash, he will shatter. What's he going to shatter? The cities of, now you don't see the article, but it's in a construct state with a definite noun with a suffix on it. So we will say the cities. This is the plural of ir. Cities of, you see this construct state. Mitzav, mumitzav by itself is a word which usually means fortress or fortification. Here it's in the plural. You can see it here with the yod, and of course with a 2ms suffix on it again. So it's literally the cities of your fortifications or your fortresses. So this is almost has an adjectival sort of a sense. We could translate it, he will shatter your fortified cities in that sense. But literally the cities of your fortifications, which you, personal pronoun here with a 2ms, you are trusting, so the pronoun is the subject, so to speak, of the participle. This is just a cal participle masculine singular from batak, meaning to trust and to trust in something, which you are trusting in them. Here's your personal pronoun, but this is the 3FP personal pronoun referring back to cities over here. So that's what that's referring to, because cities are feminine, which you are trusting in them. Now that seems a little redundant for us, but that's good Hebrew. This is called a retrospective pronoun because the hena is referring back to the asher, which is referring back to the cities. So it kind of ties that all together. And he will shatter all of them and devour all these other things with, for final emphasis right here, with the, you do have the article here. It's a little unusual because of the hate, but here's our word hedev, sword, with a comment this time, simply because of the pause at the end of the verse. So that's not unusual. He would devour all these things with the sword. Wow, quite an ominous declaration which the Lord makes there. Well, let's go ahead and hide our work now and squeeze our text down and look at a couple of translations. Almost all the translations are going to go in exactly the same sense here. So let's just take the NIV as an example. They will devour your harvest. So they've translated the singular here as a plural because you're going to get a plural over here. And as long as you're consistent all the way through, it probably is easier to do it that way. Although if you're reading Hebrew, you can see just a little nuance of difference, this back and forth between singular and plural. They will devour your harvests. So they use that as a plural because it's a collective. And food, devour your sons and daughters. They will devour your flocks and herds. Again, collective sense here. Your vines and fig trees, collective sense there. With the sword, so they front-loaded this back over to the beginning of this phrase. They will destroy, shatter, smash. They will destroy the fortified cities, cities of your fortifications, in which you trust, in which you are trusting, you could say, with the participial sense to it. And almost all of our translations are going to go in that direction. I did find one very, very good paraphrase from Eugene Peterson's The Message. It is a paraphrase, not a translation, but he really brings it out well and doesn't overstate it, I don't think. They'll clean you out of house and home, rob you of crops and children alike. That pretty well picks that up there, doesn't it? They'll feast on your sheep and cattle. You don't have the word feast, but that's certainly the idea of devouring, and they're going to take advantage of it. Strip your vines and fig trees, and the fortresses that made you feel so safe, leveled with the stroke of the sword. A paraphrase, more than a translation, but a very good paraphrase. He really gets at the sense of what's going on here. Oh, you just wish that God's people would listen to the warnings, but throughout history, it's always been the hardest thing to take seriously the word of God's rebuke and discipline when it comes to God's people then or God's people today and even in our own lives. There's going to be a positive note coming up, so do check back with us soon as we continue working through Jeremiah chapter 5 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.